Story 1. A lot of people don't realize just how bad sleep deprivation can be for your health. It messes with your immune system, your heart, and can even affect your brain long term. Honestly, many people think it's no big deal, but it really is, especially if you're constantly running on little sleep. Story 2. Driving in general. It's disturbing that the number of people who don't know how to work a four-way stop sign, park in a parking lot, change lanes, or simply back up. Story 3. Only 50% of movies that have aired in a cinema from 1990 onwards are available on streaming services today. Physical media will eventually be a critical resource for preserving film culture. Story 4. As I'm getting older, I'm realizing how many people legitimately don't know how to cook or understand basic cooking practices. I grew up cooking with my family, and a lot of my friends just happen to know their way around a kitchen, but I've met people who have never even used their oven after months because they have no need. Story 5. If you sit in the passenger seat of a car with your feet resting on the dashboard and the airbag goes off, it forces your feet up and through the window, often severing your feet. Story 6. If you drive your car into a body of water like a lake or river, immediately roll down the windows. Once you are submerged, pressure will prevent them from opening. You will not be able to open the doors either. Story 7. If you're dealing with a grease fire, never throw flour at it. Flour does not smother fire. In fact, it is highly flammable and will react like a bomb. I don't know how widespread this misconception is nowadays, but my mom once said it and I had to explain the above to her. Story 8. Disability is a numbers game. If you live long enough, you will become disabled in some way. The human mind keeps us from processing this as fact because our brains prefer to believe that our special, wonderful uniqueness and superior logic will make us the exception that proves the rule, but it never will. Ever. You, just like every other being on this planet, will experience death or physical breakdown followed by eventual death. There is no way to escape it. The only thing you can do is try to make disabled lives easier, with the knowledge that it will be you someday. Story 9. Head injuries kill. If you or someone you know has been hit hard enough to pass out or lose consciousness, seek a doctor. Brain bleeds are a silent killer. If you fall and hit your head, seek help. If something else falls and hits your head, get checked out. I cringe at the videos of someone being knocked out in a street fight. Get checked out. Story 10. When performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, you should never bend your arms. You have to lock your elbows in order to get enough pressure. Movies and shows almost never show cardiopulmonary resuscitation being done realistically. They do not have to include the unpleasant parts like vomiting or broken ribs, but I really feel like they should show the correct form. Story 11. Gas stations have an emergency off button and fire extinguishers. Play this game for the next week and try to find all of the safety equipment like fire extinguishers and automated external defibrillator devices. Story 12. Sometimes healthcare workers are assigned one-on-one to incredibly violent residents in long-term care. We're going to work knowing and dreading the fact that we will definitely be swung at, kicked, scratched, pushed, and possibly bitten. Those are the shifts that absolutely no one wants to be assigned to. We get paid less than $30 per hour to go to work knowing we will get hurt. Story 13. General sex knowledge. A lot of people aren't taught things like how common herpes is. That cold sore you got as a kid? Yes, that's a form of herpes, and you can pass it to someone's genitals if you engage in oral sex, even if you're not having symptoms. Continuing with herpes because there's a stigma around it that shouldn't exist. A lot of people won't get symptoms, and it's not included in a lot of testing. This matters because people who do know and are responsible about it can be treated poorly over something they didn't ask for. There are efforts to make cures and vaccines right now which are underfunded, and not nearly enough people know about them. If you have herpes or you don't have it and want to avoid it, I suggest learning more about ongoing research. Realize it's way more common than people think, and it's something we might see a cure for in a few years if more people raise awareness about it. Story 14. In a progressive tax system, only the part of your income over the limit is taxed at the higher rate. So if there is a 0% tax on $0 to $100,000 and a 90% tax on income over $100,000, and you made $100,001, you would pay 90 cents in tax. Story 15. The Environmental Protection Agency was formed because in 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught on fire for the 13th time since 1868. The source of the fires was the nonstop toxic waste that factories in Cleveland were dumping into the river. As a result of the Environmental Protection Agency's development, factories were suddenly expected to deal with their waste in a way that did not harm the environment. Companies and factories did not want to comply with those orders, and, as a result, much of our manufacturing factory work was suddenly outsourced because other countries did not have environmental restrictions. When other companies realized this was a much cheaper option, they followed suit. So just think, many Americans lost their jobs because companies did not want to spend the money it would take to stop dumping waste from their factory into the environment. That is how messed up the United States is. Edit for Part 2. The Hanford nuclear site in Washington state has been leaking toxic waste since as early as the 1970s. It is leaking more now, understandably. Despite the fact the site is decommissioned, there is still a massive amount of waste there, a lot of which is in underground plumes. These plumes have been eroding away at the interior and are slowly making their way towards the Columbia River, the 8th largest river in the United States. Should these plumes reach the river, a significant amount of toxic waste is going to be leaking into the river. That is how messed up the United States is. Story 16. Everyone has biases. Everyone seeks validation of their biases from others, and everyone gets uncomfortable if said biases aren't validated. Yes, even you. Story 17. Wear protective eyewear when you are working with anything that involves tools. I had a piece of metal fly by my face and cut my face when working on my car. Story 18. That you should never put metal in the microwave. It's like a little fireworks show, but not in a fun way. You'd think this would be common knowledge, but every year someone still discovers the hard way. Story 19. A disturbing number of people are completely ignorant of time zones. I have people from call centers all over calling me to speak with a doctor's office at 9 p.m. It's crazy. Story 20. I always found it weird that so many people cannot read the weather patterns around them. The weather forecast was not accurate where I lived growing up due to my hometown being remote and not much data being collected there. The weather forecast would sometimes say the weather would be fine, but you could not only see but feel something bad was brewing, literally just based on the wind, heat, moisture, and how the clouds looked. Story 21. You are responsible for creating your own privacy in public. It's not up to other people to give you the level of privacy you expect. I just posted a thread like this, and the amount of hostility I was getting from unreasonable people was surprising. Story 22. Critical thinking skills. Far too many people, looking at you, my fellow Americans, do not know how to absorb information, think on it, check other legitimate sources, and then form an opinion. We have turned into a cesspool of decide first, think later people, and it is absolutely maddening. Story 23. Your pharmacist knows a lot more about drugs than your physician, significantly more than nurse practitioners or physician's assistants, and more than your nurse could ever hope to know. Story 24. You can benefit your health significantly by engaging in activities that aren't highly dedicated gym exercises. The slogan, "No pain, no gain," has discouraged many people from doing anything at all because it suggests there's a threshold for activity to be beneficial. In reality, for someone with a sedentary lifestyle, especially at the start, almost everything helps. Simply introducing some walking or gentle bike riding into the life of a non-active person increases many health markers and boosts mental energy. I personally think the current image of a fit person in many countries is too close to that of an extreme enthusiast who sacrifices everything for their hobby. I wish more people found a middle ground. Story 25. Your child's, and frankly your, swimsuit should not be blue or green. They become almost invisible underwater. The best colors are neon orange and neon pink for water visibility. And while we're at it, those stupid arm floaties are dangerous. Story 26. That they are just one hormone fluctuation or traumatic brain injury away from being an entirely different person. People like to think that they have control over who they are, what they would do if, but in reality, all it takes is a hormonal change, a traumatic brain injury to make them become an entirely different person personality-wise. Story 27. Human female anatomy and human sexuality. Urine comes out of its own special hole, not just out of the vagina. The whole external area is the vulva. The vagina is just the hole. Abortion is the only treatment for an ectopic pregnancy, a life-threatening condition where a fertilized egg implants in the wrong place. Story 28. Do not use things that require fuel inside. Does it require gas, diesel, propane, or charcoal? Do not use it inside. Generators, tabletop grills, whatever, you will die from the fumes. Story 29. Climate change is real, and both the Republican Party and Democrats wanted to do something about it prior to a massive astroturfing campaign run by the Koch brothers. Literally everyone saying that global warming isn't human-induced is either paid by the Kochs to say that or someone who fell for their propaganda. Story 30. Do not mess around with compressed air. If for whatever reason you do end up messing around with compressed air, never point it directly at yourself or someone else. If for whatever reason you do end up pointing it at yourself or someone else, make sure there's plenty of distance between the nozzle and whoever you're pointing it at. Skin is porous. Compressed air, if not sufficiently obstructed by cloth, solid material, or even just ambient air resistance, can travel fast enough to penetrate through skin and create bubbles in your blood vessels, which is a very good way of ensuring that you have an air embolism, which is an utterly agonizing way to die. Story 31. The Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica is about to collapse, taking the West Antarctic ice shelf with it. The resultant sea level rise will cause economic destruction orders of magnitude greater than the Great Depression. Story 32. If you are in a car crash or stuck somewhere in the car, the headrest can be fully raised, and the metal prongs on it can be used to break a window in an emergency. Story 33. On January 25, 1995, a malfunctioning Russian radar mistook a Norwegian research rocket for a potential United States nuclear strike, triggering an emergency alert that put Russia on the brink of launching a counterattack. Yeltsin, briefed by his generals and handed the nuclear codes, hesitated, not because of any technical certainty, but because he had met Clinton and deemed him too rational and intelligent to launch a surprise first strike. His trust in Clinton's competence averted a catastrophe. Now, contrast that with today. No world leader, not even Putin, would extend such a courtesy to Trump. To allies and adversaries alike, he is not a rational actor but a mad king. The kind of moron who might actually push the button, not out of strategy, but out of ego, tantrum, or sheer ignorance. Where Yeltsin's hesitation saved the world, the real fear now is that no one would hesitate long enough to give Trump the same benefit of the doubt. Oh right, and a 2023 study predicted that the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation could collapse as early as 2025. Story 34. The Republican and Democratic parties swapped policies and goals at one point in history, and comparing the current party to the original party ends up being a futile effort. Story 35. Diseases that were once virtually eradicated are now making a comeback due to the anti-vaccination movement. This seriously endangers the health of people who are immunocompromised or cannot be vaccinated. Story 36. Do not wash your towels with fabric softener. It makes them water-resistant and dries them out, which can make them harder. Large towel manufacturers do not tell people this, so they buy new ones. The older generations know this knowledge, but somehow it stopped being known. I happened to be told years ago in an old job, and it has stuck with me, so now I pass the knowledge on to my customers. Story 37. Empathy. I feel like it has to be a taught skill now. Just as simple, I wouldn't want that to happen to me, and I wouldn't wish it upon another, seems to be sorely lacking. Story 38. How tax brackets work. If you make $60,000 a year, your tax bracket is 22%, but you don't pay 22% on your entire income. The first $11,600 is taxed at 10%. The amount between $11,600 and $47,150 is taxed at 12%. Only the amount above $47,150 is taxed at 22%. Somehow people get the impression that a pay raise can cause a net cut in pay due to tax brackets, and that's just incorrect. Story 39. Hitting your head needs to be taken a lot more seriously. Sure, everybody knows that if you hit your head and get knocked unconscious, then you need to get it checked out. But plenty of people hit their head and say, I was dazed for a few seconds, but there's no blood, so I'm fine. I've known two people who did this, were complaining about headaches afterward, and did not listen to me about needing to get it checked out. No matter how much I reiterated that they really should get it checked out, both refused to listen to me. One ended up passing out on his way to work and needed emergency surgery to get the blood drained from his skull. The other did not make it. Story 40. Do not wear a claw clip while driving. If you get into an accident, we end up having to tweeze or pull it out of your skull due to the force of the accident. Story 41. If you are in the United States, know which hospital emergency rooms are covered under your insurance. If not, if you call an ambulance, they take you to the closest hospital and it might not be covered and you get stuck with the full bill. Story 42. How to administer Narcan and how to actually perform CPR. You should be going at least 2 inches deep, and it is common for ribs to break while receiving CPR. Also, women are 14% to 27% less likely to receive CPR from men because CPR mannequins are designed as males, and people feel awkward about breasts. Go right between the nipples and do it at 100 beats per minute. Songs like Staying Alive and Pink Pony Club are at about 100 beats per minute.